Hello and welcome to Study IQ. I am your friend Rahul Saigamkar. I hope you are all in good spirits today. Also, I wish that your preparation is going up to the mark. Now, with that note, let us begin the agenda. Today, we are going to talk about Wildlife Protection Amendment Bill 2021. In fact, we are going to have a critical analysis of this bill. In the first half, we'll understand what are the provisions of this bill. This bill seeks to amend the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Of course, this has been brought with good intentions because it tries to plug in the loopholes which are already there in the WPA 1972. And the provisions that this bill aims to bring will bring us in line with the CITES Convention. So, in this discussion, we'll also talk about the CITES Convention. But we are going to focus predominantly on highlighting the loopholes of this bill, especially from the perspective of invasive alien species. The definition of invasive alien species is quite narrow in this bill. That would be the agenda of our discussion. To get to know all this information, which is quite relevant to the examination, stay with me on Study IQ. And if you're preparing for competitive exams like UPSC Civil Service Examination or State PSC, do visit our website studyiq.com. Alternatively, you can also download our app from Google Play Store where you'll get all the information. And do not forget to use the code RAHUL33, capital RAHUL33 without any spaces to get 33% discount on any course across Study IQ platform. Right, let's begin our discussion. As I told you, Wildlife Protection Amendment Bill was introduced in the Lok Sabha in December 2021. The bill has now been referred to the Standing Committee. The bill is now with the Standing Committee. In fact, the discussion that we are having right now, the criticism or the critical analysis that we are having right now is from the perspective of Vidhi, Center for Legal Policy. They are the ones who have highlighted the issue with the invasive alien species. In fact, Vidhi, Center for Legal Policy, has already given their recommendation to the Standing Committee. Let us wish that the Standing Committee would accept these recommendations and broaden the definition of invasive alien species under the bill. Let's try to understand what is the problem. As I told you, the Wildlife Protection Amendment Bill 2021 was introduced on December 17, 2021. It was later on referred to the Standing Committee. The bill seeks to amend the original Wildlife Protection Act 1972 specifically to implement the provisions of CITES, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wildlife, Flora and Fauna. Please remember, CITES, it tries to stop it tries to regulate the international trade in endangered species. So what is the CITES? CITES is an international agreement between the governments which came in 1975. Although it was open for signing in 1973, but it was ratified eventually in 1975. India is a signatory to the CITES, which ensures that international trade in specimens of wildlife does not threaten the survival of these species. Under CITES, there are three appendices. Please remember, under CITES, there are three appendices for plant and animal species on the basis of their extinction level. Now, the convention itself aims to regulate the trade in wildlife, flora and fauna and their species. And right now, the bill has been brought to implement the provisions of this particular convention. Let's look into the bill. What are the provisions of the bill and what is the agenda today that would be discussed? See, the key features of the bill are that it aims to rationalize the schedules. Please remember, as of now, in the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, there are 6 schedules. I hope you know this, right? Wildlife Protection Act 1972 has 6 schedules as of now. 4 schedules related to animals. 1 schedule is related to plant. Please remember this. There is 1 schedule right now in WTO which is specifically connected to endangered plants, and there is 1 for the vermin. Vermins are the one. Killing these animals is quite allowed. Once an animal is declared vermin, people can kill them. For example, rats, mice, etc. They are all vermins. Crows are also vermins. Right? Pigeons, I think pigeons are also vermins. Just verify that, right? But 6 schedules are there, and this particular bill reduces it to 4. It reduces it to 4 schedules, 2 for animals, 1 for plant, and it inserts a new schedule for specimens which are listed in the CITES Convention. Apart from that, the bill also satisfies the obligations under CITES. The CITES Convention requires the signatory parties to have a management authority, and this management authority will give licenses. For example, if I am a trader, if I want to export some plant species or some animal product from India to some other country, then I need to have a license from this management authority. Apart from that, it also aims to set up a scientific authority which would give advice with respect to the specimens that can be traded, right? Of course, some specimens can be traded, some animal product or some plant product has to be traded from India to outside. To regulate that, a management authority and a scientific authority is going to be set up. Apart from that, it also brings certain provisions, the control of sanctuaries and the new projects. It gives more powers to the state government. The act enters the chief wildlife warden to control, manage all the sanctuaries. Apart from that, the bill also gives the powers to the state government to set up the standing committees, right? Because we'll talk about the criticism of this also in some time. Apart from this, another provision is there regarding the conservation reserves. As of now, under the Wildlife Protection Act, conservation reserves can be declared only by the state governments. The areas which are adjacent to the national parks and the wildlife sanctuaries, they can be declared as conservation reserves. It can be done by state government. Now, the bill empowers even the central government to notify conservation reserves. Apart from that, if anybody surrenders captive animals, they would not be given any sort of compensation, no compensation for such surrendering. And the bill also defines or enhances more and more penalties. So these are the basic provisions of the bill. Now, till now, you'll see that, sir, everything looks quite fine. Then what is the problem? The problem is with one thing. And this is the agenda for discussion, invasive alien species. We are going to talk about invasive alien species. The amendment bill empowers the central government to regulate or prohibit the trade possession of invasive alien species. We know that invasive alien species are the second biggest threat to our environment. The first is, of course, habitat degradation. The second one is invasive alien species. Now, what is an invasive alien species? An exotic species which has been introduced in some ecosystem, which destroys the ecosystem or which reduces the competition in the ecosystem because it spreads continuously. There are so many invasive alien species. For example, pigeons are invasive alien species animals, right? Or you must have known about Parthenium or the Congress plant, which spreads very, very fast. It is an invasive alien species. Nilgiri tree is an invasive alien species which has come from outside, which has come from Australia. So invasive alien species has been defined very narrowly in this particular bill. How it has been defined? Invasive alien species, according to the bill, refers to a plant or animal species which is not native to India. I'm repeating, which is not native to India and whose introduction may adversely impact the wildlife or the habitat. We all know that invasive alien species, it hampers the growth of other entities. It basically reduces the biodiversity. Clear? Because only that species spreads. But this particular definition is a little problematic. Now, this is something which is defined in our bill. What is the definition of invasive alien species according to Convention of Biological Diversity? Now, it defines invasive alien species as species whose introduction or spread outside their natural past or present distribution threatens biological diversity. Please remember, I'm repeating this. Whose introduction or spread outside their natural past or present distribution threatens the biological diversity. I hope you did understand the problem. Now here, our bill says not native to India, but the CBD definition says which is spread outside its natural past or present distribution. It can be a plant, animal, fungi. Again, it simply has to be expanded outside its natural habitat. Now, what is the problem with Indian definition? Let's try to understand that a little. But in general, invasive alien species and the rules and regulations in India are governed by certain obligations. We do have an obligation. Constitutional obligation is there on the central government and the state government according to Article 48A, which aims to protect the environment. Apart from that, we are also signatory to Convention on Biodiversity, where we need to protect the biodiversity. And invasive alien species is a threat to biodiversity because whenever it is introduced, the biodiversity will reduce. It is going to lead to reduction in biodiversity because the other species will die. We are also a party to Aichi targets. Now, please let me know in the comment section, where is this Aichi city, right? Aichi city, let me know in the comment section. In the CBD itself, we have Aichi targets, and target 9 talks about elimination of invasive alien species specifically by 2020. Apart from that, we also have brought certain rules and regulations like Plant Quarantine Order 2003, where if plants, seeds or any entity which are brought from outside, they have to be inspected for potential risk of pests or potential invasive alien attack, right? And also remember that these things are already inadequate. Wildlife Protection Act that we have of 1972, that also has certain loopholes. And now the amendment is not plugging it. Already the framework is inadequate, and the proposed amendment that also is rather inadequate in terms of definition. I told you what was the definition according to India's bill. Not native to India. But what is the definition of Convention on Biodiversity? It does not talk about a geographical area. It talks about the presence of that invasive alien species in their natural past or present distribution. If they are brought from these places to some other place, it will hamper. Now let's take an example. Why the definition is very narrow? There is an example of Catsagon. I'm quite sure you must have seen this Catsagon plant here. Catsagon was a native of eastern India, but in many afforestation campaigns, it was brought to other parts of India. Now, this Catsagon, it will not come under the definition of invasive alien species. Why? Now, it is a native of India, it is a native of eastern India, but from eastern India, it was brought into other parts of India, which has created a problem. An invasive alien species within India. That is the problem with the definition. I hope it is clear with you. The same applies to animals. In fact, National Biodiversity Authority has already recognized the problem. We have already introduced certain Indian species itself, like the Asian elephant, the barking deer, the spotted deer. We have introduced these from the mainland India into Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And now they have become a threat to the flora and fauna in Andaman and Nicobar. Again, this particular translocation or transferring of these species from mainland India to Andaman Nicobar, it does not come under the definition of invasive alien species under the current amendment. Clear? That means within India itself, there is so much of diversity. India is a huge country. India has so many endemic species. But a species from northeast, when it is brought into mainland India, it will become invasive alien species, or it might become invasive alien species. The same applies vice versa also. A species from the mainland India or a species from, say, Western Ghats, if it is introduced in the northeastern forests, it might become invasive alien species. But the current definition, where it says not native to India, it is defined geographically. So means within India I can transfer the species, within India I can trade these species, but outside of India not possible. What we are telling here is when a species is transferred within India, that can also become invasive alien species. And that is why the definition of this invasive alien species has to be broadened in the amendment bill. And this input has already been given by the Vidhi Center for Policy Research to the Standing Committee. Apart from this, there is another criticism which has been accorded by the former Principal Chief Conservator of Forests in Karnataka, B.K. Singh. He has criticized the Wildlife Protection Amendment Act 1972 and its amendment also. It gives powers to the state governments or the state board for wildlife to constitute standing committees. He says that we already have a national board for wildlife, which is headed by Prime Minister. Very similar to this, there are state boards for wildlife, which is headed by respective chief ministers. And now, the power is given to the state governments to create their own standing committees, which are going to appraise the projects from time to time. What B.K. Singh argues is that if standing committees of state board wildlife committees or the state boards of wildlife, they are given power, they are constituted and they are empowered, then more and more projects would be referred to them. These committees, he says, they hardly meet or deliberate. What they do is they simply take up the developmental project and they accept it. He says that if the state board of wildlife and their standing committees meet, they simply recommend the proposals which will lead to more destruction of habitats and more deforestation. Again, this is with respect to the working of standing committees. Please remember, it is not a criticism per se of the amendment bill, but with respect to working of standing committees. A suggestion here would be that standing committee should appraise the development projects on the basis of their environmental impact assessment, especially on the local flora and fauna, and then only project proposals have to be accepted. But as of now, the procedure according to BK Singh is such that the 100% proposals are accepted without even looking at what is going to be the impact. He says that the standing committee, the central standing committee, and if the state standing committees are created, they would be merely looking at developmental projects. They would not be looking towards conservation of environment or preservation of environment. So that's another criticism which has been accorded by BK Singh, the former Principal Chief Conservator of Forests. This was just a part of discussion because we are talking about criticism or critical analysis. That's why this was added. But a bigger worry is the current narrow definition of invasive alien species. We hope that this eventually changes when the bill will be passed in Lok Sabha. Let us hope that it is passed with the amendments. Now, with that note, let me end my discussion here. Thank you for watching this video. Jai Hind.